At her fancy party, my sister-in-law made me announce her name like a waiter, put some respect in it. Everyone clapped. Minutes later, the pianist spoke up, "Wait. Isn't that the woman who funded my conservatory?" Silence took over as I bowed. So this happened a few months ago, and I still don't know how I feel about it. My sister-in-law, my brother's wife, has always been a bit grand. She hosted a big party at their estate and asked me to do the guest announcements, including one for her where she literally made me say, "Put some respect in it." Everyone clapped like it was some performance. Then, mid-party, the pianist said something that stopped everything cold. He recognized her as the person who had anonymously paid for his entire music education. She froze. The party changed after that. And so did a lot more. I'll admit up front, I'm not the guy people usually expect to see at a party like that. I'm Russell, 52, an art teacher in Albany, divorced, middle class in every sense of the word. I keep to myself. I like quiet mornings, oil painting, second-hand bookstores, and I've had the same 4 close friends for the last 20 years. So when my daughter Joelle turned 16 and my brother Adrian insisted we hold her party at his place, I was wary. He and his wife, Valentina, live in a huge house overlooking the Hudson. The kind with a private drive, black iron gates, and a wine cellar I'm not rich enough to breathe in. But Joelle was thrilled at the idea. She loved her uncle, and I didn't have the heart to say no. He meant well, I think. He's always tried to be generous with his money, if not his time. Joelle had never had anything extravagant. Her mom, my ex-wife, and I split up when she was 10, and things had been tight ever since. So I agreed. The planning was mostly handled by Valentina, which in hindsight should have been a red flag. She's not easy. Beautiful, yes. Charismatic, definitely. But there's something about her that always felt performative, like every room she enters becomes her stage. She used to be a lifestyle consultant for high-end clients, rich women who wanted someone to tell them how to live prettier lives. The party was scheduled for the first weekend in September. Still warm, but with that crisp edge in the evening air. Joelle had picked a theme, golden hour, and Valentina took it very literally. Everything was gold-toned, the decorations, the lighting, the champagne, even the embossed napkins. She hired a florist from Manhattan and a caterer who looked like they belonged on Food Network. There was a live pianist. There were champagne towers. There was a dress code. The day before the party, Valentina called me over early for a quick run-through. I thought she needed help with chairs or logistics. Instead, she handed me a thick cream envelope with a list of names. "You'll be announcing the guests as they enter the garden," she said, like it was a given. I blinked. "What?" "You have the right voice." "Warm, but not overwhelming," she added, sipping something from a crystal flute. "It's just a touch of elegance. Everyone loves a formal entrance." I tried to protest. I wasn't dressed for it, didn't know half the names, and felt completely out of place. But she was already moving on, adjusting flowers and giving direction to the staff. Adrian wasn't even home yet. That night, she made me practice reading the names out loud with her, correcting my pronunciation of European surnames. Then she handed me a smaller card. "This is my entrance cue," she said, smiling with her perfect teeth. "Make it fun." I looked at it. And now, entering the garden under the auspices of grace and grandeur, the ever-enchanting Valentina Navarro cross. "Put some respect in it." I stared at her, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. "You want me to say this, out loud? In front of everyone?" "Of course. It's light-hearted. The guests will love it." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to say no. I wanted to call her pretentious and narcissistic and ridiculous. But Joelle was buzzing with excitement and had spent the last 2 weeks talking about her gold dress, how this would be the best night of her life. I swallowed it. Fine. The next day was chaos and champagne. Joelle looked stunning. The estate looked like a high-budget movie set. Valentina was glowing. I stood at the entry archway with a microphone clipped to my lapel and the envelope of names in hand. People arrived slowly, mostly rich friends of Valentina and Adrian, their teenage kids, and their polished spouses. I read the names as instructed. Then it was time for Valentina's big entrance. I cleared my throat, already burning with second-hand embarrassment. And now, entering the garden under the auspices of grace and grandeur, the ever-enchanting Valentina Navarro cross. I paused, looked at her standing there like she was stepping into a Vogue spread. Put some respect in it. People clapped. Some laughed. A few took photos. She twirled once in her gold gown, then descended the steps into the garden like royalty. I wanted to disappear. But I didn't expect what happened next. About 20 minutes later, the pianist, a tall, clean-cut man in a simple black suit, returned to the baby grand set up near the buffet. He tapped the mic gently and spoke. "I just want to say something before I begin." Everyone paused. Conversations quieted. This evening is a big deal for me, not just because of the music or the setting. Years ago, I was accepted into the Conservatory program at Juilliard. I was broke, no family, no options. Then out of nowhere, I received an anonymous scholarship, full tuition. All I knew was that the donor was Venezuelan. The name on the paperwork was Valentina Navarro. He looked up and scanned the crowd. "If that's the same woman who just walked in, thank you. You changed my life." There was a stunned silence. No one clapped. No one moved. It was like a spell had broken. Valentina froze. Her face was unreadable. Adrian turned to look at her. A few guests stared openly. Someone near the back said, "Is it true?" Valentina didn't answer. She didn't nod or speak. She turned slightly, walked toward the house, and disappeared around the corner of the veranda. The pianist, confused but undeterred, started playing something soft and classical. Chopin, maybe. I don't remember. I stood there still holding the announcement envelope, suddenly feeling like I'd stepped into someone else's reckoning. Later, I found her on the upstairs balcony, smoking alone. I didn't say anything right away. She offered me a cigarette, which I declined. She finally said, "You could have warned me." I asked her, "Why didn't you acknowledge him?" She stared out at the river. "It wasn't supposed to be known. I never wanted anyone to know." She told me, quietly, that the pianist's mother had been her childhood friend back in Caracas. They had escaped together during a violent time. The mother had died crossing into the US. Valentina made it through. Years later, she found out her friend had a son, gifted in music. She paid for his schooling anonymously. "Why not take the credit?" I asked. She shrugged. "Because people like their benefactors clean. Their parties shallow. Their hostesses polished. And I don't want to be remembered as anything else." That moment stuck with me. The silence of it. The way she had constructed her entire world around appearances, and then, just for a second, it cracked. I never told anyone what she said that night. But something shifted after that. Joel's party ended on a quiet note. Valentina disappeared to Paris a few weeks later. Adrian didn't offer much of an explanation. "She needed space," he said. A month later, Joel's high school guidance counselor called me. Someone had fully funded Joel's first year at NYU. Anonymous donation. There was no card. No message. Just a wire transfer. I knew. And that's where things start to change. I didn't tell Joelle who I thought the donor was. She was over the moon, and honestly, after everything we'd been through, the divorce, the small apartment, her having to share shoes with her cousin in freshman year, it felt like something good was finally falling her way. And I didn't want to cloud that moment with adult complexities. Still, I knew. I knew the way someone knows when they see handwriting and don't need a signature. It had Valentina's fingerprints all over it, quiet, calculated, dramatic in its own muted way. Adrian and I didn't speak for nearly 3 weeks after the party. Not out of anger, more like avoidance. He wasn't great at conversations that required introspection. Always had a talent for skimming just above the surface. But eventually, I got a call from him asking if I could swing by the city for lunch. He'd booked a table at an expensive place in Soho where the chairs were lower than the plates and the servers wore better shoes than I did. We met at 1 p.m. sharp. He was already seated, looking thinner, stressed. Something in his eyes looked different, not broken exactly, but unsure. That was new. I didn't think you'd come, he said. You asked. I figured you needed something. He smiled but didn't deny it. We didn't talk about the party right away. We talked about Joelle. About the scholarship. I watched his face carefully. You know about that? I asked. He nodded. She didn't tell me, but I know her. She told me, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. At least, part of it. He swirled his wine, something red I couldn't pronounce. She doesn't do things halfway. Even when she disappears, it's like she's writing a novel no one gets to read until the last chapter. I asked him where she was. Paris, he said. Still. And you? He looked away. I don't know. I waited. I don't know if she's coming back. Or if I want her to. That surprised me. They'd always seemed like a package deal, him with his old money calm, her with her curated mystique. But maybe it was only seamless on the outside. She never really wanted this life, Russ. She wanted control. Power, in her own way. And the only way she knew how to get it was to play the role, the perfect wife, the glamorous hostess, the woman people remembered. But they remembered her for the wrong reasons. He nodded slowly. Maybe that's the story of her whole life. I left that lunch feeling heavier. Not just for him or her, but for myself. For Joelle. For the strange, thin thread of family that kept pulling us into each other's storms. A few weeks passed. Fall arrived. Joelle started planning for NYU, touring dorms, visiting campuses. She asked if I'd ever been to the city much when I was younger. I hadn't. Not really. I told her mother and I had always talked about going together, but life got in the way. Then, late one Friday evening, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Just a cream envelope sealed with wax. Inside was a handwritten note. For the girl who wore gold better than I ever could. Don't let the world dim your light for the sake of fitting in. V. Attached was a smaller envelope. A plane ticket. One way. Paris to New York. Date open. She was coming back. Or at least, planning to. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time holding that ticket. I don't know if she meant for it to come to me. Or if she sent similar ones to others. I don't know what message I was supposed to take from it. But I couldn't stop thinking about something she'd said on that balcony the night of the party. Because people like their benefactors clean. Their parties shallow. Their hostesses polished. Maybe she was tired of being all three. The next time I saw Adrian, it wasn't at a restaurant. It was at my apartment. He dropped by unexpectedly, which he never did. He looked worse. Eyes sunken, suit wrinkled. He asked if I had coffee. I made a pot. We sat in my kitchen like brothers who hadn't spoken in years. She's thinking about moving back, he said, staring at his mug. She sent me a ticket, I replied. I know. She sent one to me too. We sat there for a while. Then he finally said, "You know what hurts the most?" I shook my head. She was always a stranger to me. Even when we were close. Even when we were happy. I think I loved the idea of her more than the woman herself. And I think, she knew. I didn't have advice. I didn't have anything comforting to say. I just poured him more coffee. Adrian left around midnight. He thanked me for listening. He didn't usually say thank you. That alone told me something had shifted. Meanwhile, Joelle was thriving. The scholarship had given her a sense of confidence I hadn't seen in years. She started painting again, too, something she hadn't done since her mother moved out. I saw myself in her sometimes, in her quiet, in the way she stayed up late mixing colors that only made sense to her. But then, about a month before her NYU orientation, something happened that reopened everything. Joelle came home from school holding a printout. "What's this?" I asked. She handed it to me. An article. A feature in a European arts journal titled The Quiet Philanthropy of Valentina Navarro. It had a photo of her in Paris, wearing sunglasses and a long coat. It mentioned her anonymous scholarship programs, her patronage of conservatories, and a new initiative she was launching for first-generation college students in New York City. "She's helping other people," Joelle said. "A lot of people." I nodded. "Is she the one who sent the scholarship?" I hesitated. "Yeah," I said. Joelle was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Why didn't she just say something? Why didn't she want anyone to know?" I didn't have a good answer. Still don't. "She's complicated." Joelle looked at the photo again. "She doesn't look happy." I looked, too. She didn't. Not really. Just poised. Joelle folded the paper and put it in her bag. "I want to meet her." I didn't argue. The next few weeks were a blur: graduation, summer jobs, orientation prep. Adrian came around more often. He and Joelle reconnected, slowly but genuinely. He offered to help with move-in. I was surprised, but Joelle said yes. And then, one August evening, I got an email. Subject line: "I'm ready to come home." The address was untraceable. No name, just the letter V. And attached was a single sentence: "Will you meet me when I land?" I stared at that email longer than I want to admit. I must have read that one sentence 10 times. "Will you meet me when I land?" I didn't respond right away. I closed the laptop and went for a walk instead, around the block, past the old bakery that shut down during COVID, past the neighborhood library with flickering lights in the front window. I didn't know if she meant home as in Adrian, as in New York, or as in something else entirely. But I knew one thing: the version of her that had sent that email wasn't the same woman who once made me recite her entrance like a Broadway script. This Valentina, she was shifting. She was unsure. And for the first time since I'd met her, she was asking for something instead of orchestrating it. 2 days later, I was at JFK. Her flight landed early. I watched from a distance as she came through the international arrivals terminal. Her hair was shorter, chin length now, and she wore flat shoes and no makeup. That alone was disarming. This wasn't the Valentina who wore perfume so rich it could announce her arrival 5 minutes early. She looked like someone who had walked through a storm and was just starting to dry off. When she saw me, she smiled, small and tentative. "Russell." "Valentina." We stood there for a second. Then she said, "Thanks for coming." And for once, I believed her. The ride back to the city was mostly quiet. She didn't ask to go to Adrian's. She asked to go to a hotel in Midtown, one she'd stayed in before. Said she needed to ease back in, not drop into the deep end. I respected that. I offered to help her settle in, but she waved me off gently. I need a day or two to sleep off the flight and think. I didn't push. That night, I sat at home wondering what came next. Whether she would actually reach out to Adrian. Whether she was really here to stay, or just passing through again like some seasonal tide. Then Joelle called me. "Dad, is she here?" I didn't lie. "Yeah." There was a pause on the line. "Can I see her?" I hesitated. "I'll ask." The next day, Valentina called me. "She wants to meet, doesn't she?" she asked before I even said hello. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Okay. Just the two of us." We arranged for them to meet at a cafe near the Upper West Side, quiet, low-foot traffic, outdoor seating. I waited down the block, pretending to read a newspaper while they sat across from each other for almost an hour. I couldn't hear them, didn't need to. I watched Joelle's shoulders shift, tense, then relaxed. I saw her laugh once. Valentina reached across the table and touched her hand. Something passed between them. Not reconciliation. But maybe recognition. Afterward, Joelle walked toward me without saying anything. She hugged me. A long hug. "She's sad," she said. "Yeah. And strong." "Yeah." Then she added, "I think she's lonelier than she knows." We didn't talk more about it that day. I didn't ask what they said. But I felt something in the air had moved. Like the dust had begun to settle. Over the next few weeks, Valentina began resurfacing. Quietly. Carefully. She reached out to Adrian, though not to move back in. They had lunch. Then another. He didn't talk about it much, but I saw in his face that it was heavy. Not hostile, just waited. He told me one night, after a long drink and a short dinner, we built a life on a performance. Neither of us knew how to stop acting. "Do you still love her?" I asked. He looked tired. "I think I love what we tried to be." I don't know if that's the same thing. Meanwhile, Valentina started working with a nonprofit based in Harlem that offered arts mentorships for underserved youth. She didn't put her name on anything. She didn't take interviews. She wore jeans and no jewelry. I saw her once, at an event Joelle dragged me to. She was helping kids clean up after a paint session, wearing an old tee and a smudge of blue acrylic across her cheek. That night, Joelle said to me, "She's trying." And I agreed. But not everyone forgot the party. That pianist, Marcus, he got a record deal out of the exposure. The video of his speech had gone mildly viral in a niche circle of the internet. Valentina was mentioned only briefly in those clips, but it was enough to spark curiosity. A few socialites whispered. One even messaged Joelle on Instagram, asking if the rumors about your aunt are true. Joelle didn't respond. Later that week, she showed me her reply before hitting send. She gave him a future. She gave me one, too. "What have you done lately?" I didn't stop her. But the whispers lingered. Especially among Adrian's crowd, those old money types who talk with soft voices and sharp tongues. One evening, Adrian invited Valentina to one of his firm's galas. She said yes. She wore a plain black dress. I drove her there, by request. The ride was silent, but not tense. At the entrance, she turned to me and said, "If I choke tonight, you'll be there?" I laughed. "You don't choke." She smiled, but there was something behind it, a small crack in the mask. Inside, people turned. Murmurs started almost immediately. She didn't look at any of them. She walked straight to Adrian, touched his arm softly. He offered her a drink. The ice in the room began to melt. And then, as if fate couldn't resist a dramatic beat, the pianist, Marcus, walked in. He'd been invited to perform. Their eyes met across the room. He smiled. Just a small nod. She nodded back. I watched the whole thing from the side of the room. No stage. No applause. Just a quiet acknowledgement between two people whose lives had intersected in a way no one else there fully understood. But there was still more to untangle, more truths buried beneath the gold and silk, more damage to repair. Valentina still hadn't spoken to her sister in Venezuela. Adrian still didn't know if he wanted her back, or if he was just clinging to the version of his life he'd built with her. And me, I still hadn't figured out why she asked me to be there that day she landed. Was it convenience? Or had something shifted between us? One night, late September, she called. I picked up on the third ring. "I need to tell you something," she said. I sat down. "It's about Joelle. About her scholarship." I felt my chest tighten. I didn't just send the money. What do you mean? I met with NYU admissions. I told them her story. Her art. Her work ethic. I showed them her portfolio, the one she sent for the art program. I advocated for her. I let that sink in. I know I should have told you. I know it wasn't my place. But I saw something in her. I saw the girl I wanted to be when I was her age. I didn't know what to say. Gratitude doesn't feel big enough sometimes. She deserves everything, Russell. Not because she's my niece, but because she survived this life and still creates beauty. That matters. The line went quiet. Then she whispered, and maybe this time I want to be remembered for something honest. After that call with Valentina, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry, or even overwhelmed, but because I finally saw the full arc of what she'd done. Not just the donation. Not just the portfolio. She had strategically and intentionally done everything Joelle needed, not for credit, not to rebuild her image, but because Joelle reminded her of who she might have been if she hadn't sold herself to the performance of wealth so early in life. It was the first time I realized Valentina's greatest act wasn't the party, or the persona, or even the donations. It was learning to dismantle herself, piece by piece, in plain view of the people who once cheered her facade. But the world she once ruled wasn't going to let her go quietly. A week later, Adrian forwarded me an email from a woman named Camille Dumouriez, one of Valentina's former clients from her lifestyle consultancy days. Camille was now a semi-famous influencer in the interior design space, known for speaking on panels and wearing beige everything. The email was short and sharp. Hope you're aware your estranged wife is trying to rebrand herself as a humble arts philanthropist. How quaint. A few of us are thinking of going public with some stories, just in case the public forgets what she was before the redemption arc. Best, Camille. It was the kind of threat rich people make, not loud, not overt, but poisonous. A promise of humiliation wrapped in white gloves. Adrian was livid. But also afraid. She's trying to ruin her, he told me on the phone, pacing audibly. They think Valentina's weak now. Like they can say anything and she won't fight back. I told him to forward me every email. Every name. Every threat, subtle or not. Because I had an idea. See, Valentina had spent so much time scrubbing her past, trying to erase the version of herself she no longer believed in. But I realized, that version of her? The sharp, polished, calculating woman? That side hadn't disappeared. It had just been sleeping. And maybe it was time to wake it up. One last time. I called her the next day. I'm going to say something, and I want you to just listen, I said. Okay. You don't have to defend yourself anymore. Not to those women. Not to the ones who clapped at your parties and are now rooting for your fall. Russell, no. Listen. You built their worlds. Their homes. Their brands. You told them what to wear and how to talk to their husbands. You created their images. And now they want to erase you so they don't have to admit they were ever just copycats. Silence. Then I said, so let them come for you. But not empty-handed. That night, we sat together in her hotel room with a laptop, 2 glasses of wine, and 3 decades of receipts. Literal receipts. Old emails, consultation drafts, client records, mood boards, voice memos. It was staggering. She had everything. I never deleted anything, she said, a little embarrassed. Good. Because we're going to curate it. I helped her write a piece, not a hit job, not an exposé, but a memoir of sorts. A personal essay, timed perfectly to run in a well-respected design and culture publication that had recently started a series on image, identity, and reinvention. We titled it, The Woman You Hired to Be You, a memoir of designing other people's perfection while losing my own. In it, she told her story. From Caracas, to crossing the border, to marrying into money, to surviving social warfare disguised as brunch. She didn't name names. She didn't need to. The truth was there in the tone. Anyone with half a brain could fill in the blanks. We published it anonymously. But everyone knew. And then, we waited. The reaction came fast. First, polite silence. Then aggressive whispers. Then the kind of full-body panic only a certain type of insecure wealthy woman can feel when she sees the curtain pulled back. Camille and her circle tried to clap back subtly, social media posts about integrity and fake narratives. But none of them dared name Valentina. Because they knew. She had the receipts. And she wasn't bluffing anymore. What no one expected was the public response. People loved the piece. Middle-aged women. Young designers. Aspiring immigrants. Artists. Survivors of wealth's quieter violence. They saw her story and said, finally. Someone said it. Offers started pouring in. Not sponsorships, real ones. Speaking gigs. Book proposals. An invitation to teach a seminar at Parsons. But she didn't take them. Instead, she sent out a single statement through the magazine, "Thank you for seeing me. But I'm not building a brand anymore. I'm building a life." And just like that, the power shifted. The same women who once clapped at her party were now too afraid to mention her name in any context. She'd done the thing they feared most, stepped off the stage without losing the spotlight. That was her revenge. Quiet. Clean. Satisfying. She didn't need to scream. She just told the truth in her own voice. And the ones who built themselves on pretending to be her had no idea how to compete with that. Joelle started NYU that fall with a full ride and a new fire in her voice. She painted all through her first semester. One of her professors asked if she'd ever thought of doing gallery work. I told her, "You come from a long line of women who created beauty and then handed it to others. Maybe now it's your turn." Valentina came to her first exhibit. She wore jeans, a scarf, and no makeup. People didn't stare at her anymore. They saw her. And that was enough. As for Adrian, they didn't get back together. But they found a peace between them. A respect. Maybe even friendship. I think they both realized they weren't each other's homes, just part of the map that got them there. And me? I kept teaching. I kept painting. But something inside me shifted too. Because I learned that revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes, it's simply about letting the truth rise to the surface, and trusting that it will do the work for you.